Welcome to A Shock in the Dark. I'm the narrator on a road trip around the United States of America, following your stories wherever they may take me. And this week, I'm in a very creepy cabin in the most remote location of my trip so far. It's beautiful, but very creepy. And it's just to the north of Aspen, Colorado, the location of tonight's story. And by the way, it's one of the weirdest stories I've ever come across. And as long as I've been doing this story has something I have never heard of. Very unique, and even though I was unable to stay in the actual cabin where this took place, I'm actually happy about that because tonight's letter's super creepy. Well, you'll hear. Dear narrator, I'm going to be vague about the nature of my business and who I am just because I'm sure if people I know or people I do business with hear it, they're going to think I have a screw loose. That's what I used to think about people who had ghost stories or, Bigfoot sightings or saw UFOs and aliens, but I swear, I have no idea what's happening anymore. I can honestly say I have no idea what's real. How crazy is that? What kind of statement is that? I don't know what's real anymore? Well, listen to my story. As far as my background goes, I built a fairly large company out of nothing. I grew up as an only child to a single mom, poor, or at least low income. I started working when I was 15. Opened my own shop of a certain type when I was 18, and now, nearly 40 years later, I have a small chain of high-end product stores that are generally located within a certain region of the U.S. Well, about 10 years ago, we started doing our own manufacturing, and those items are sold throughout the world, wholesale, retail, and you've probably seen these things that I've manufactured online, or you've probably run across one or two. Well, the store I use as my main headquarters is where I live, in Aspen. Now, I'm not trying to be braggadocious about my business or anything. I am proud of it, but the reason I bring up my business is this. I built this company myself. I run every aspect of it over several locations, so I really don't have the time to sit down and write some pretend story that would have the potential to damage my reputation if people figure me out. I have too little time and too much at stake to risk it all so I can play story time on your YouTube show. No offense. I'm writing this because what I experienced is apparently unique to me. I've tried researching it, and that's how I came across your YouTube channel. And I found myself binging on your videos, but I'm telling you, no matter how much I search, there's nothing like my story anywhere on the internet. And I need answers for my own peace of mind, and I'm hoping you or one of your listeners can point me to anything even remotely similar to what's been going on in my life. Here's what happened. So, I'm not quite 60 years old. I have 3 kids. Well, they're not kids anymore. All of them are fully grown adults, and I'm divorced. I do date, but because I put so much time in my business, it's rare, and honestly, I'm paranoid that somebody only wants to date me for my money. I've been very fortunate in business, and it's hard for me to trust people. I know I've lost some great relationships due to my own paranoia, but that's on me. I had a small medical issue this summer, and it scared me enough. I went to the ER. I'm fine, but it led me to seeing a doctor for the first time in over 20 years, and he made me promise to take some time off. No distractions, no work, just relaxing. So, I took him up on it. In fact, I was actually looking forward to it. Last month, October 14th, 2022 to be exact, I finally forced myself to put down the work and put somebody else in charge of the business. That was the most difficult part. I rented a cabin for 1 week near the White River National Forest, so only about 45 minutes to an hour from Aspen, but deep into the mountains where people don't go, so I could be secluded for real. Quite purposefully, This is no luxury cabin. This is a straight-up homesteader 1800s log cabin out in the middle of nowhere. In fact, it's smack in the center of over 100 privately owned acres of pristine mountain forest. Even outside of the 100 acres fenced-off area, there's nobody around for miles. So, I have my secluded destination far away from any human contact, but I want to take that to the next level, so I decide to go cold turkey on technology. I left my phone locked in the glove compartment of my car. I didn't have a computer or even a television, although I did bring one luxury item. I brought an old iPad and a very high-end battery-powered Bose Bluetooth speaker so I could listen to music. That was my only luxury, though. I brought along enough food to last me throughout the week, mostly canned and dry food since there's no refrigeration on site. I brought a toothbrush, a couple of changes of clothes, and a flashlight, but that's really it. I had very clear directions and exactly how to find this place, but it still took me quite a while to find it. A couple of the dirt roads were very well hidden by overhanging trees and tall grass, and even when I found the gate, it was intimidating. This was a giant metal gate that looked like it was made out of brushed stainless steel or something. It had all been riveted together. Extra large chains had been strung multiple times through the braces that were built into the gate. And all of this was secured with a heavy-duty industrial padlock. While the gate was this shiny silver metal, the entire fence line, as far as the eye could see, was a solid wall of what looked like thick, rusted metal sheets that had been welded together with iron posts set into the ground with concrete, and there was razor wire running all along the top of this whole fence. And if that wasn't intimidating enough, there were warning, no trespassing signs about every 10 feet apart at eye level on this huge metal wall and on the gate itself, and these signs were official looking, for lack of a better term. I mean, they didn't look like what a farmer would put up on the fields where his cattle grazed or something. They looked like something you'd see at a military base. It made me feel like I was breaking into a secret military installation. In fact, so much, even though I was told in advance about the gate and the signs, it did give me pause. I mean, what if I was at the wrong gate and ended up on some military base or prepper or militia property? But the key I'd been given unlocked the gate, so I was comfortable. I was in the right place. Anyway, I got into the car, got unloaded, unpacked, set up, because it took me a long time to find this place. By the time I was done, the sun was going down and I was worn out. So I went to bed pretty early on night one. On day two, I listened to some of my favorite albums I used to listen to when I was a kid. Everything from Pink Floyd The Wall to the Beatles, Abbey Road, Sgt. Pepper's, Stones, Grateful Dead, Miles Davis, and I was bored out of my mind. I just felt like I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't making progress, and I didn't like that feeling, so I ended up making some repairs around the cabin. It's not my cabin, but at least I was doing something, and knowing somebody else would come along and have a more enjoyable stay because of me made me feel good. I went for a hike through the forest for a few hours, and once again, by the time the sun went down, I was worn out and went to bed early on night two. Late that night of night two, I suddenly woke up, wide awake, no reason. I don't know what time it was. I didn't have an alarm clock, and I wasn't wearing glasses, so I didn't bother looking at my watch. I took a sip of my water bottle and turned over to go back to sleep when I heard a noise. It wasn't anything readily identifiable. It was just a vague sense that something was walking around outside the cabin. Maybe a deer? Family of deer? And I started thinking about the person who rented me the cabin, who told me there are elk in this area, moose, and he advised me to keep my eyes peeled for a family of mountain lions who live on this property. Well, I felt safe enough. The cabin has sturdy, heavy-duty latches on the door, but I did go peek out the window to see what I could see. But there was nothing, so I went back to bed. The next day, I looked for tracks outside the cabin, but I didn't see anything. That night 3 in the cabin, same thing. Woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of movement outside the window. Looked out, couldn't see anything. I went and got my flashlight this time from where I left it in the kitchen. Shined it outside, looked again, and there was nothing out there. I thought about kids doing some kind of early Halloween prank, but I was nowhere, miles from any other humans, on a clearly marked private property in a cabin that would be difficult to find even if you know exactly where it is and have directions. So I just went back to sleep. Next day, again, I did look for tracks and there was nothing there. Night 4, I was ready. I kept the flashlight near the bed and my MP3 player, which had a clock on it, and my glasses right there, and I went to sleep. This time, I woke up startled. My heart was beating a mile a minute, and all the hairs on my body were standing on end. I sat up in bed, wide awake, staying perfectly still. All focus was on my ears, listening for the smallest sounds, ready to identify any noise. Suddenly, bang, 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 bang! Somebody was beating on the door. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. There's not supposed to be a human 4 miles from here, but I literally jumped out of bed and ran over to the window where I could see whoever it is banging on the door, but I don't see anything. But I do hear something. Obviously, the sound I hear was not this, but I'm just describing what it reminded me of the best way I can. It sounded like if there was a tiny horse that weighed 1,000 pounds running away. You know, it was like a horse gallop, and the feet hitting the earth were these heavy, heavy thuds, but the speed of the steps was like something very small running, maybe you would say scurrying. So I'm holding my flashlight, which is a super bright flashlight, over 1,000 lumens, and I got the beam focus on, so it's basically like the sun shining outside. It can easily, temporarily blind a person, so, I flip it on and everything's super bright, entire front area of the cabin, all lit up like daytime, but there is nothing to be seen. No movement at all. I was super nervous about this now. No animal beats on the door like that. So I'm thinking somebody's trespassing and they've been messing with me in the middle of the night every night. Just to be honest, I was happy I had my flashlight, which could be used to blind someone and is large enough to use as a blunt weapon, but I was really sorry I didn't bring a gun with me at this point. I don't own a gun. I've never gone hunting, not even once in my whole life, and it just never crossed my mind. So I'm standing there perfectly still, listening, when bang, bang, bang! The banging starts again, but this time it sounded like it was the window in the back bedroom. It sounded like it was about to shatter the glass any second. I ran from the front door into the bathroom, and the second I crossed the threshold of the bathroom, bang, 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 bang! The banging was at the door again. I was freaking out at this point, millions of thoughts crossing my mind. I was thinking about running to my car and taking off, but I didn't want to leave the protection of the cabin, and I had no idea how many people were out there and if they were armed, but mostly I was thinking that somebody was about to break into the cabin at any moment, and I had to better prepare myself for that. I ran toward the kitchen as the banging started on the bathroom window again. I grabbed the biggest knife I could find, looked around the room for what I could barricade the doors with, and looked for anything else I might use for a weapon. The banging had moved to my bedroom window now. There was a super heavy sleeper sofa in the living room area, and I pushed it against the front door. Now the banging was on my bedroom window and the bathroom window at the same time, so there had to be at least two of them out there. I went into the bedroom and flipped the mattress up against the bedroom window. Don't ask me what good that would do. I guess I was just trying to barricade myself as best I could on such short notice, but, especially after being woken up suddenly from a deep sleep in the middle of the night and out in the middle of nowhere. Well, the noise had stopped for the moment, so I turned the flashlight off and crept over to the bathroom where the beating on the window would happen intermittently, and I quietly stepped up to the edge of the tub and positioned myself so that as soon as the knocking started again, I would be able to flip that flashlight on and see who I was dealing with. My heart was still beating so hard. I found myself thinking that maybe whoever was outside the cabin would be able to hear it. And then I noticed I could hear myself breathing from all the excitement, fear, and running around and pushing furniture against the door. But then I saw movement. Make no mistake about it. It was pitch black in that forest, no electricity for miles. So with the flashlight off, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, but keep in mind, this was around October. I want to say around the 17th. I have no idea what phase the moon was in at that time, but there was just enough moonlight that when my eyes eventually adjusted to the dark, I could tell something was moving outside the bathroom window. So I made the split-second decision to not wait for the banging to start again. The next time I detected any movement, I would flip on that flashlight and simultaneously scream my head off and hopefully scare off whatever's doing this to me. I waited, heart beating hard, breathing, filling the silence. Then, movement. But it was what I heard that prevented me from springing into action. It was a voice. Shock, please edit this part out if my description is just too bizarre. I know this is going to sound completely insane, but I'm desperately trying to give you a very real, very detailed sense of my experience, and I've already spent an hour trying to accurately describe what I heard, and this is the best I can come up with. So I hear two voices, like a quiet conversation happening 2 feet from me outside the bathroom window, but these weren't normal voices. Do you remember, this is the crazy part, do you remember The Wizard of Oz? I've not seen it in like 30 years, but one thing I remember from it was when Dorothy's house lands in that weird village and the mayor is out there and all the little people are singing and dancing and giving her lollipops. Well, a few of those people had voices that sounded both high-pitched and deep at the same time.
And she's not only merely dead, she's really most sincerely dead.
Well, that's what this was like. Like, maybe somebody sped up the voice if somebody had an extraordinarily deep voice, but aside from the sound of the voices, it was the language. Now, they were speaking quietly, but I heard enough to know it was not English. It really didn't sound like any language I had heard before. I can speak English, Spanish, a little Japanese, but that's about it. But I do deal with people from all over the world all the time. So I'm familiar with the unique traits of various languages, but this sounded like, I don't know, maybe German mixed with Mandarin backwards? Like, words would start softly, then crescendo into a harder, more guttural sound, if that makes any sense. Well, I'd only been listening for a few seconds when I decided it's now or never. Time to flip on that flashlight and scream at the top of my lungs. Here we go. The flashlight came to life, throwing this intense beam directly toward where the voices were coming from. But as I prepared to scream, as I took in this huge breath, I finally saw what had been tormenting me. And my big breath in suddenly turned into hyperventilation with what I saw. Just outside the cabin window, there were two creatures, human-like in form, but very different. I'm going to describe them in as much detail as possible because what I'm really shooting for here is somebody in your audience to tell me what these things are. I've tried everything possible to identify what this is, and I can find nothing that's even close. So there are these two creatures, very small. They're somewhere around 2 to 3 feet tall. Each had 2 arms, which proportionately were way longer than the arms of a human the same size. Like, their arms must drag the ground if they don't hold them up when they walk. They had 2 legs each, wore no clothing, smooth skin, no hair. Their skin appeared to be white or grayish white. It was hard to tell because that flashlight is so bright. It looked like their skin was reflecting a lot of that light. Their faces were very human-like, but their noses were almost completely flat against their faces. And they didn't seem like they had any lips. Their mouths were more like slits in their faces. And each of them had 2 of these tiny little horns coming out of the front top of their heads. It gave them an appearance that reminded me very much like a cartoon devil. Specifically, like a baby version of the devil logo on the side of a can of Underwood brand deviled ham. And these horns were covered with their skin, or at least they were the same color as their skin. Now, I can't tell you about their hands and feet for sure because, frankly, I don't know if my brain filled in these features or if I actually paid attention to this detail, but in my memory, their hands seemed more extremely bony compared to human hands, and their feet seemed to be twice as big as a human foot, of relative size. And the one other feature that I'm certain about, and definitely noticed at the time, both of them stood in a kind of relaxed, hunched over kind of way, and they both had big stomachs. Like, they both had pot bellies. Obviously, I know absolutely nothing of what these things are, how they communicate, and I certainly don't know anything about their culture, but I can tell you this. I'm 100% certain that the look they had on their face was surprise. Eyes wide open, their lipless mouths forming an O shape. And after that second of shock, they took off in a flash. Oh, and when they ran on their feet, but also seemed to use their hands a little bit, like to give them more speed or something. And the sound when they ran, that was that heavy, fast, galloping sound I had heard a couple of nights before. As they ran away from the cabin, I followed them with the flashlight until I could see the reflected eyes of more of these things standing further back in the forest. Along with the 2 that were running away from me, I saw the orange eye shine of like 3 other of these things, but as I moved my flashlight along the tree line, I saw 3 more. Then a group of 6. Then a bigger group of maybe 10. And another group that was around 15, 20. It was too many to count. There had to be hundreds of these things, all eyes looking at me. I guess I hadn't noticed. I had been hyperventilating this whole time, and just as I noticed that's what I was doing, the last thing I remember, my left foot slipped off the edge of the tub. I woke up with the sun on my face, not knowing at all where I was. No memory of what had happened to me just a few hours before. I finally got my eyes open and I realized I was on the bathroom floor. Suddenly, that entire night flashed through my head and I jumped up. My flashlight was still on. It was hot in my hand. I did a quick search of the cabin. The mattress was in front of the window. The sofa bed was still in front of the front door. I still had a knife in my hand. I didn't try to put things back in the right place. I didn't clean up after myself. I left all of my food and my iPod and even my favorite and expensive Bluetooth speaker. I just left it in the cabin. I just left. I nervously made my way to the car and just took off. When I finally made it back to my house in Aspen, I called the owner of the cabin and I told him I had to leave early. He asked me what was wrong, but I really didn't know what to say. I finally called him again 2 days later and just asked him if anybody had seen anything strange in that forest. I don't know if he was lying or not, but he denied it. I apologized for leaving the cabin in such a state, but I told him he could keep my iPod and the Bluetooth speaker for the trouble, and I paid him for the entire week. Like I've said at least a couple of times now, I have searched everywhere to find any creature that even sounds remotely like this, and I can't find anything anywhere. So please, if you have the ability to read this on your show, I would appreciate it, and please forward any messages you get of anybody who says they've seen anything like this. It's just driving me crazy. I can't find anything like this on the internet, anywhere. I really do appreciate your show. Thanks for providing this forum for people who've had these experiences, because I really don't know where else I would have turned if it wasn't for you, so thank you. My email address is below. Please don't share it with anyone. Again, please forward any correspondence you think might be helpful to me. Your friend, Anonymous in Aspen. Well, thank you, Anonymous. I do appreciate that. I've never heard of anything like that in my life, and that sounds horrific. And I'm sorry that happened to you, man. That's awful. But yeah, we'll continue this trek around the United States of America. The A Shock in the Dark tour of the U.S. based on letters I get from you. I don't have a Patreon. I don't charge anything for the show, so please just, hit the like button, make a comment in the comment section, subscribe. These things help me out a lot, so I appreciate that. And we'll see where I turn up next. Until then, good night, wherever and whoever you are.